Right now, there's millions of workers across the nation that really do believe that if something were to happen to them tomorrow, their work benefits would take care of it. And honestly, a lot of us are in that position. You may or may not be one of them. A lot of times, we have the health insurance, we have the disability, we have maybe even life insurance. We like to think that we have it all covered, but there's still a huge gap that exists. And believe it or not, it's actually really easy to fill. And it's something that most people may have heard about but just never had it explained properly, and it's called living benefits. Now, before you tune this out and just think that it's another life insurance conversation, it actually fits really closely with your health insurance coverage, especially if you have an employee choice plan or ICHRA benefits. Here's the reality. When it comes to life insurance, a lot of people think that the real problem is just dying and that's what it's there to take care of, and it is. But one of the major problems that can happen comes before that. Cancer, heart attack, stroke, critical illness, being out of work for months, bills piling up, and all this financial insecurity and instability are all happening while you're trying to recover. And this is really where people are starting to figure out that having coverage and being fully prepared are two completely different things. Because yes, health insurance helps, disability helps too, but there are still major gaps that are going to exist that these two things don't take care of. And most people honestly never really think about this until they're actually living through it. And that's where living benefits can completely change the whole conversation. Now, maybe some of you out there have traditional coverage where you're offered $50,000 to $100,000 in life insurance. It's real quick, easy. You sign on the line. It's a couple of dollars a month. Not really that big a deal. It's pretty much a no-brainer, right? And that's kind of where the problem is because most employees don't really stop to think about what they actually have. And that's where the catch is. A lot of times what's going to happen is that insurance is going to be tied to your employer. So what happens if you leave your job? A lot of times that coverage goes away. And here's the scary part. If your health changes anytime during that time period, it may be impossible for you to get coverage again later on. Now, suddenly that cheap little work policy that most people don't think that much about becomes a much bigger deal because when that protection is actually needed, it can be a lot harder to get. Now, one thing that I want to make sure that I clear up, I don't think that work benefits are bad. In fact, I encourage you to get those little policies. The more coverage, the better, especially if you can get it at a cheap price. And I've seen some really good employer plans. I've helped set them up in the past. Some are fantastic. But what this is really about is just understanding how all the different pieces fit together because most employees are never shown the whole picture. And I'm sure you've been through this before. Usually what ends up happening is you go into an HR seminar, or maybe not even that, you get an email or something, get a brochure sent to you where you get to look at a couple of the different options and then just pick one. And that's about as far as any of the explanation goes. And there's never really a deeper conversation that's had with employees about things that really matter. Things like what happens if you get seriously sick? What if you have to go for months without income? What happens if a claim gets denied or something like that? What happens if your health permanently changes? That's where employee choice plans or ICHRA setups become really interesting because now instead of being stuck in an employer design package, you start getting more flexibility and control. So you get to pick your doctors, you get to pick your network, you have more freedom over what types of treatments you get. And you also have control over your additional benefits too. And this can include life insurance. And this is where things start shifting mentally for a lot of people because now instead of just borrowing insurance from your employer, you now have something that's permanent and that's yours that you get to choose. So now you have something portable and something that's designed around your life, not just around your current job. Okay, so now let's go back to living benefits for a minute because this is actually something that changes the way that people think about life insurance in general. Now, from what I've seen, most work policies don't include living benefits at all, and most personal policies do. And they also come without any additional costs. You just have to qualify for them typically. So let's talk a little bit about what living benefits are. So basically, in short, what they do is they allow you to access the money in the life insurance policy in the event of something major. Typically, it's cancer, heart attack, strokes, critical illness, things like that. And this matters more than most people realize because even with good health insurance, we could still end up under extreme financial pressure if we are ever undergoing a serious illness. And here's a question almost nobody ever thinks about until they're already going through it. Is what happens if a claim gets denied? What happens if a treatment exists, but it's out of network or it's experimental or maybe even out of the country, or it's just simply not covered under the plan? And you know what? Most of us think the same way. I have health insurance. I'm going to be covered no matter what happens, but life just doesn't work that smoothly. And it's not all doom and gloom, but the reality of the situation is sometimes approvals take time, sometimes appeals take time, and sometimes we're stuck trying to make serious medical decisions while also trying to figure out how we're going to pay for things as they come up. And that's where having access to cash really changes the situation. It doesn't necessarily replace your health insurance. That's not what I'm saying. But it does allow us to have more options while trying to navigate one of the hardest things that we could be going through in life. So what do I mean by that? Maybe it helps cover travel costs. Maybe it helps cover lost income. Maybe it helps us to pursue a treatment course when we're waiting for appeals or approvals. And that's the part that we really think about until we're forced to. Now, again, this isn't about me trying to create anxiety over benefits or anything like that. Actually, it's the complete opposite. I think understanding how all of this stuff works actually reduces anxiety, because once you understand how it works, you understand where the gaps are and then also what you can do about it. Our health insurance handles the medical bills. Disability handles our income up to 60%, of course. But the life insurance can handle all the gaps that can happen in between those. And here's the great part. Once we have those things aligned correctly, the whole system works a lot better. And that's the bigger picture that most employees never get walked through. And honestly, that's where I spend most of my time working with people. Not just looking at one policy by itself, but looking at everything as a whole to make sure everything is working as efficiently as it can to work not only for what's going on today, but what could happen in the future as well. Because honestly, none of us know what's going to happen in the future, right? What happens if our health suddenly changes and we can't get coverage later on? Or end up needing a treatment that our health insurance doesn't cover? Or one that I hear all the time, what if a claim is denied while the bills are still coming in? And this is one of the biggest ones that I try to make sure that everyone that I work with really understands is, what can I control long term instead of just borrowing temporarily from my employer? Because unfortunately, on paper, a lot of these benefits are going to look very, very similar. But in real life, that's where the differences and the problems really show up. And most people don't even realize it until they're actually going through something difficult. Now, at the end of the day, most people technically are covered, but there's a big difference between being well covered and being fully prepared. And once you really start understanding how all these benefits fit together, you really start to see that there are a lot of little gaps here and there that are really easy to miss, but have really simple solutions to fix them. So if you've got any questions on any of this, go ahead and drop them in the comment section below. You can also send me messages directly. A lot of videos and future videos will come from those conversations. And if you'd rather talk privately so that we can take a look at what this looks like personally for you, just go ahead and check the comments or description. I'll leave a link below. And honestly, you don't necessarily have to be on an employee choice plan or an ICHRA for this to work. It'll work just fine with a traditional group plan as well. The key thing is just understanding it, because sometimes just understanding how all of these things work together completely changes the way that we look at our benefits at work moving forward.